The title of my message today is called Judge Not. Judge not. Anybody here, you've ever judged somebody before? I'll wait for your hand. Raise your hand. All of you, raise your hand. We are good at judging. We are professional judgers, right? And even though Jesus said something about that, in Matthew chapter 7, verse 1, Jesus said this. He says, "Judge not that you be not judged. For with the judgment you pronounce, you will be judged, and with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Why do you see the speck that is in your brother's eye, but you do not notice the log that is in your own eye?" Comments like this is why Jesus is the greatest preacher that has ever lived. Or how can you say to your brother, "Let me take this speck out of your eye," when there's a log in your own eye? You hypocrite. First take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye. Do not give dogs what is holy, and do not throw your pearls before pigs, lest they trample them underfoot and turn to attack you. Judge not. Come on, let's pray together today over the preaching of God's word. God, thank you for your word. Thank you that it instructs us, it corrects us, it encourages us, it convicts us, it builds us up. And Lord, I pray that you would give us eyes to see people the way that you see people, made in your image. God, I pray that you would speak to us in a profound way today. In Jesus' name, and we all said, amen. Amen. Have you ever filled out a Yelp review? Have you ever done this? You ever go to a place and have an experience, and then you're like, my experience was either so good that I gotta jump on Yelp and let the world know that this experience was amazing. Or conversely, have you ever had an experience that was so bad, you're like, I gotta warn the people. I gotta be the one, like waving my hand, like I got to feel this thing out. Now, I gotta be honest, I've never filled out any sort of review like this. Never filled out a Yelp review, never really, it's not necessarily my personality type. However, I have used Yelp, right? I've never filled it out, but I have used it. Now here's what I'm gonna say. If you filled out a review, I'm not judging you. But one thing I find interesting about Yelp is that it disciples us in a really interesting way. Like, I think Yelp is really bad for our ego. Like Yelp can be a little toxic for our ego. What I mean by that is we all love some us opinions. Like, I love my opinions. You love your opinions. Like, you love your thoughts. I love my thoughts. And the problem is Yelp has given us something to amplify our experiences. And if we're not careful, we will fall in love with judging. And then judging will just be the prism by which we see everything, right? And so we're just kind of looking at something and judging it. And this is where we got to be careful with judging. Here's my main point today. It's this, is that judgment is a burden to exercise rather than a position to attain. Judgment is a burden to exercise rather than a position to attain. It's interesting what it says in Matthew chapter 7, verse 1. Jesus says, "Do not judge, otherwise you'll be judged. For with the judgment you pronounce, you will be judged, and with the measure you use, it will be measured to you." See, every single one of us, we love certain seats. Like you probably have a chair at your house, right? Like, other people get to sit there, but not if you're there. Right? Like there's a particular chair. You're like, I love this chair. I feel comfy in this chair. I feel smarter in this chair. I feel more connected to God in this chair. Like, there's a particular chair at my house that I feel dramatically drawn to. In fact, it was a chair that we purchased, and it was actually in my office at the old church building on 730 South Florida Ave. And it was in the corner of my office, and it's this kind of like brown leather chair, and there's like an ottoman, and it was just like in the early days of our church, it's where I'd pray, it's where I'd think about decisions for the church. And then when we kind of moved offices, it didn't make sense in kind of our new offices, so we brought it home, and it's at my home office, and I love this chair. Like, I feel more connected to God in this chair. I feel smarter in this chair. I love this chair. Like, all of us have probably had a moment where we felt attached to a chair. Like, have you ever came to church and someone was sitting in your chair? You ever come to church and someone's sitting in your seat like you've been coming to the 1045 service for the last 4 years? And some new person has the audacity, the unmitigated gall to show up to your service and to sit in your chair. And it's kind of disorienting. You show up and you're like, oh, that's usually where I sit. That's where, like we all have chairs. We all have positions and places that we like to sit. Now, what's interesting about this passage is Jesus gives us, at first, a very straightforward principle. And here's the straightforward principle that Jesus says. He says, do not judge or you will be judged. Do not judge or you'll be judged. What is he saying? He's saying, do not sit in God's seat. Do not sit in God's seat. We're given this principle, a very straightforward one. Now, what's interesting is the verb in the original language that's used for judge is not forbidding all judging of all kinds. Right? You would not be able to function as a human being if you did not make judgments throughout the course of your day. Right? You have to make judgments based on, am I going to hang out with that person? Am I not going to hang out with that person? Am I going to spend this money like this? Am I not going to spend this money? Like, you have to make judgments. In fact, even in Matthew chapter 7, it's on the back end of what we call the Sermon on the Mount. Right, where Jesus is making a lot of moral distinctions in which our judgment would be necessary. And so what's interesting here, in fact, even in John chapter 7, verse 24, Jesus says, do not judge appearances, but judge with the right judgment. So some judging is forbidden, while others seems almost required. And what I want to help us do is I want to help us to distinguish between the types of judgments and the type of posture while judging that we are to have and the types of judgment and the type of posture that we are not to have. And the best way that I could think to illustrate this was with these two chairs. Again, we all have seats that we love to sit in. And the scriptures tell us, right? He says, judge not that you be judged. He said, for with the judgment you pronounce, you will be judged. With the judgment you pronounce, you will be judged. And then he goes on to say, and with the measure you use, it will be measured unto you. And so oftentimes, the seat of judgment that we like to sit in is not the one that we're supposed to sit in. And so we all have our megaphones, right? We all have our things that they should be doing and the things that they shouldn't be doing, right? We all know what the person on our right and left ought to be doing, right? And we all carry around this measuring stick when we're sitting in this seat going, hey, you're not really living up to what I pronounced over you. And so there's this seat right here that we get really, really comfortable in. And the reason why we like this seat as opposed to this seat is, for a while at least, this is fun, is it not? I mean, are we being honest, right? We're in church. Like, this is fun. Me looking at you and like yelling what you should be doing, that's fun. That's awesome. Like, me telling you what you need to be doing better without taking any inventory of my, like, this is fun. Me going up to you and going like this and making you feel insecure is more fun than me feeling insecure. The problem is, this is God's seat. And the problem is, he is the one that balances the scales. The problem is, he's the measurer. The problem is, this is his word and his statutes and his ways and his precepts. They're not mine. Instead, the judgment seat that we are to sit in has a device that we don't always like. And it's this right here. We don't like this one nearly as much. Like, we don't love this seat of judgment because, like, it's hard for me. It's harder for me to take it off me and put it on you. See, the types of judgments that we are to make, this is why it's a powerful thing when the psalmist David says, search me and know me, O God, that I might not sin against you. And this is the seat that you and I are to sit in. This is the place that we can sustain. This is the seat that doesn't make us grow embittered and angry and frustrated. Can I tell you, this is fun for a while, but this will eventually make you just angry all the time. Like, this is fun for a while, but this will eventually cause you to grow cold towards people and your heart to be hardened towards other people. But you and I, man, we love this seat. And Jesus tells his disciples he doesn't want them to be judgmental or hypocritical. And if you judge like this, you will be judged with the same spirit as well. And essentially what God is saying is he's saying, if you judge others from your place, then God will judge you from his place. God will judge you from it. And I don't know about you, but I want the grace and the mercy of God. That is what I need. That is what I desire for my own life. And the disciple who usurps God as judge will have things to answer for. So Jesus is warning us, do not fall into this temptation. Don't get comfortable and don't get used to the wrong seat. Some of us, man, and by the way, if you are a Christian for like a cup of coffee, like, you know, we've sat in this seat before. And sometimes you've went through these seasons where you knew exactly what everybody else should be doing. And what God is trying to do is he's trying to get you and I in the right, sustainable seat. And in verse 3, he says this. He says, why do you see the speck that is in your brother's eye, but you don't notice the log that is in your own eye? Or how can you say to another brother, let me take the speck out of your eye when there's a log in your own eye? See, sometimes we just can't see it in ourselves, huh? Like, sometimes we just can't see it. Like, I notice your stuff and you notice my stuff a lot more than we notice our own stuff. Like, we just see it. Like, you can sniff out pride a million miles away in other people, can you not? Like, you can see it. You can spot it out. With ourselves, it's harder to see. In fact, even King David had this issue. King David was a man after God's own heart. And at one particular moment in his life and season in his life, what happens? He sees this woman, and he's attracted to this woman. And he goes, yep, that will be mine, thank you very much. The problem is she's married. And so he sets up this whole elaborate thing. He has an affair with her. She gets pregnant. And in order to cover up his tracks, he has her husband killed. It's a horrific thing, horrific series of acts. And Nathan the prophet shows up to David. It's one of the more fascinating stories in all the Bible. Nathan the prophet shows up to David, and he's like, hey man, I got a story for you. I have a story for you. He goes, there was this man, and he had just, as far as the eye could see, he had all kinds of animals, and he had this huge, spread, and he was a wealthy man, and he was living his life. And there was this other guy over here, and he just had one little sheep. And this man loved this sheep. Was crazy and cared for this sheep. And this one man that had this entire farm saw this one man's sheep and took that man's sheep from him. And the prophet Nathan says, hey, King David, what do you think should happen to that guy? David could see it so clearly. He goes, oh, that guy should die and have to pay back 100-fold everything he took. And I wonder if Nathan's like, for real, bro? I wonder what Nathan's response, he's telling this story. He's like, dude, you're so dense, you don't even realize this song is about you. This is about you. And Nathan looks at me and says, you're that man. Sometimes it's just hard to see it in us. And this is why we have to be able to be aware of the symptoms that come along with when we have a log in our eye. And I wrote down a few things of just ways that we can tell that, man, there is a log in our eye. Here's the first one. If you're taking notes, write these down. Here's the first one. The person with the log focuses on certain things and neglects others. focuses on certain things and neglects others. See, one of the things that I've found is when we have the log in our own eye, we always place the level of the infraction based on what our current struggles are. And so what we tend to do is, if I don't naturally struggle with that, then those sins are the biggest deal in the world. And everybody struggling with these sins are the worst. But our particular struggles, our propensities, our habits, our things, they're infractions, but they're not as bad as that. And so what we do is we categorize. So then the only thing that we see is like that infraction. And so there are particular sins that we go, that's the worst, and we just kind of hold on to these other ones. So when we have the log in our eye, we focus on certain things and we neglect others, not realizing we all have different struggles. We all have different things that we're navigating. Here's another one. The person with the log, this is a big one, knows the language but doesn't carry the Spirit. They know the language, but they don't carry the Spirit. I remember one time I was talking to a young man. He was one of those like 19-year-old expert theologians. I don't know if you've ever met these people. Almost always guys. I don't know why, but they almost always are. And I was talking to this 19-year-old young man, and he was a pro, man. Just ask him. Like he was awesome, and he was a pro, and he understood the deep things of God at a very, very, very high level. And we were having a conversation. We were talking about, he didn't even go to our church, but he had problems with our theology, and I'm like, okay, and so we were having conversations, around different things, and some of the stuff that he was talking about was just a little too big for his britches. I don't know if you ever experienced this. And at one point in the conversation, I said, hey, man, can I just encourage you in your journey of discovering who God is, that the level of certainty with which you are talking is wild. And it kind of sounds like you understand all there is to understand about God. And once God fits in that box, bro, I don't know who you're worshiping. And I said, there has to be an element of humility and like fear of the Lord when you come to these subjects and when you come to these things. And I just don't know. And this is what he said. This is a quote. He goes, no. Like, I know that, I am but dust. And he said, I don't know if you've ever been in a thing where somebody said something and they were using the right language. But when he said it, I was like, I don't think that you believe that. I actually, and so I told him that. I go, I don't think you believe that. I actually think you think you're pretty awesome. I actually think you're really impressed with you. Because I actually don't even know that you would have set up this meeting if you actually thought that. See, you know what I don't want? I don't want biblical language with an unbiblical heart. I do not want, if it wasn't for God, I'm just a wretched person. If it wasn't for God, I don't want to spew those words and not have the posture and the spirit to go, no, for real, guys. Where would any one of us be if it wasn't for the grace of God coming into your life like a raging river, and where you have sinned, conquering sin, death, and the grave? And so when you have the log in your eye, you know the language, you know the spiritual language, you know the theology. Apart from Christ, I can do no good thing. Right, but for real? Do you really believe that apart from God, you and I are dead in our trespasses? And when you have the log, you know the language, but you don't carry the Spirit. Here's another one. The person with the log lacks a wide array of relationships. You lack a wide array of relationships. Because here's what I found. People with the log in their eye, they can only hang out with other people with the log in their eye. Because the rest of us can't keep up. Like, we're not good enough for you. And what I have found is, man, if I can remove the log in my eye, what am I going to do? Man, I'm going to have robust relationships. And some of those relationships are going to be with people that believe what I believe. And some of those relationships are going to be with atheists. And some of those relationships are going to be with all types of people. Why? Because you can take the log out and you can go, man, I can begin to see every single human being made in the image of God. And I can have a relationship with them. Here's another thing. This is a big one. The person with the log loves to prove a point more than make a difference. And this is coming from a person that loves to prove a point. But when you have the log in your eye, you love to prove a point. You'd rather be right than make an impact. You'd rather be right than have a voice in somebody's life. You'd rather be, and so when we find ourselves like in that position, man, we have to be very, very careful. Here's another one that I like physically wrote down this morning because it just kind of came to me while I was in worship the first service. It wasn't in my original notes, but here's another one. The person with the log is robbed of joy and consumed with others' motives. Come on, when you have the log in your eye, you are just robbed of joy. And I just find it funny sometimes. It's like we know the motives of every other person. See, when we have the log, we can't even enjoy our sonship or being a daughter to the king. Why? Because we're sitting in the wrong seat. See, this is the seat of sonship. This is the seat that a daughter sits in. This is a seat that the Lord sits in. And if you're sitting in the Lord's seat, you can't be a son. And if you're sitting in the Lord's seat, you can't be a daughter. And so sometimes, like, there is security. Like some of you right now, you're 14, enjoy the security of the bills your parents are paying. Praise God. At 15 years old, you just say thank you and go on your way. Oh, but we want this seat. No. There's beautiful things that happen in this seat. There's beautiful things that say, no, I'm a son. I'm a daughter. I don't have to take a measuring stick around to everybody. That's God's job. I don't have to carry the stress of that. I get to just go, search me and know me, oh God. That I might not sin against you. Lord, I'm growing. Lord, I'm on my way. And you know those mirrors that like really show you up close? You're like, ooh, I didn't want to see that. Come on, this is actually a more gracious and more joyful place to live. Is right here. This is not joyful and not gracious. The last one is this, is the person with the log, couldn't think of any more creative way to say it, is lying. The person with the log is lying. What I've found are, can I be honest? Some of the most religious people I've ever encountered have the most wild stuff going on. I'm just telling you, it is a form of self-hatred. A part of it is you know what you're doing and you know what's going on in your world. And so that's called projection. And so sometimes, man, if you have a log in your eye, like you're lying. You're lying to yourself, you're lying to us, probably to both. And here's what we have to remember. We have to remember that, guys, we have our hands full with just us. Like we have our hands full. Like I know we want to sit in this seat. And by the way, you'll be tempted to sit in this seat, not just by like your own like, psyche and your own heart, but you'll be tempted to sit in this seat by other people. And you want to know why? Because people are going to come to you and they're going to go, what do you think about X? And you're going to think, I've been waiting for a long time. For someone to ask me, right? Can I tell you, I try to be as cautious as possible. Like, oftentimes people will ask me if there's something big in Christianity going on, or maybe somebody that was like, that they know I'm in the same circle as and something's going on. They will ask me, hey, what do you think about that church? Or what do you think about that leader? What do you think about that pastor? And not in an evil way. They're not even doing it intentionally, but what they're asking me to do is to sit in this seat. That's what they're asking me to do. And don't get me wrong, I have opinions. And so do you. You have thoughts and opinions about things, but be careful that you just don't get accustomed to sitting in this seat, because we can forget something. So oftentimes I'll go, if it's somebody I trust and somebody I'm close with, I'll go, well, here's kind of what I think, but I'm always very quick to give this caveat, but because I don't want to get comfortable in this seat. This is not my seat. And so I go, yeah, I have thoughts, but you want to know what the reality is? I got my hands full with Grace City. I got my hands full with my own pride. I got my handful with my own ego. I got my hands full with my own life. You can't carry both of them. You can't sit in both seats at the same time. And so what happens is we get put in these positions. This is not saying that you have to be perfect, but you just have to be careful. Like, again, just be really, really careful when you start spouting off about what other people should do and what they should be doing and what should be going on. And we live in this day and age where like everybody has an opinion. Now, again, this is not saying that you have to be perfect to help someone else out, but you got to take the log out of your eye at least. In fact, in verse 5, Jesus says, "You hypocrite. First, take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye." See, we can detect the difference. I want to have the team come up. I want to finish with a couple thoughts. We can detect the difference between a judgmental person and a helpful person. We really can. We can detect the difference between a judgmental person and a helpful person. And the goal of removing the speck in your neighbor's eye is to be helpful. It's not a means to self-righteousness. This is why I always find it incredibly fascinating when Christians, or at least people that profess Christ, will comment on other Christians' posts really judgmental things. Like it's a very fascinating thing that takes place, and I'll see this, and these back and forths are always so meaningless and so futile to me. Because I'll read some of these comments and these people will be like judging something in a really, really harsh way, and not in a self-reflective way, but in this way. And then the person will always come who's defending themselves with 1 Corinthians 5:12. In fact, you might have even been here and sitting in this message and you've come into our church and you're going, well, Pastor Andrew, in 1 Corinthians 5:12, it says that we are to judge the church. Right, that we are to judge the church. And there's truth in that, but let me give you some context to that. Let me tell you what Paul is not saying. Here's what Paul's not saying. When he says, hey, you are to judge the church, he's writing a specific letter to a specific church at a specific time to a specific people. And so here's what he's not saying. What he's not saying is, you in Iowa are called to judge the church in Lakeland, Florida called Grace City. That's not what he's saying. He wasn't thinking in his head, oh, there's going to be this social media outlet in which we're going to be able to spout off against any Christian community we don't like. I mean, could you imagine the hubris you have to think your job is to call out the church? Like, that's an insane amount of pride. Like, that's why I always love funny comments like, well, the church in North America, you speak for the church of North America? That's great. Well, the American church, you speak for the American church? Wow. I remember I was speaking at a conference for a friend of mine, Banny Liebscher, who pastors Jesus Culture. And he had me and two other people, and we were going to get up, and Jesus Culture is like a prophetic, it like comes out of the Bethel world, very prophetic, is like those guys, like we're Pentecostal with breaks, they're like Pentecostal no breaks. And Banny talking to me and two other pastors, and he goes, hey, I want the three of you to preach for 20 minutes on what the Lord is saying to the church. And he's like, so hey, what kind of stuff are you going to say? And so both these two pastors, we're all kind of in a room, in an office, just talking. And I go, Banning, I don't know. And he started laughing because he knows me very, very well. He knows what I'm doing. I don't know what God is saying to the church in Iraq. How would I possibly know that? I'm trying to lead great. I got my hands full with Grace City Church in Lakeland, Florida. And I wasn't trying to make the two people that spoke with such authority feel bad. I was just kind of saying all I can do is make observations and discern. And I think sometimes we got to be careful. We're like, oh, I'm here to judge. No, you want to know how it's really designed to play out? Is that, yes, we are called to judge the church, but we are called to judge the church within the community that we find ourselves in. And the reason why that is so important is because I can't cross-check what Tim 57964 is saying. That's his handle. Like... I don't know that his life has given him credibility to say the words that he's saying. I don't know nothing about Tim 56794 You want to know where credibility is built? In community. You want to know where we really, really know, oh, this person has done the work of taking the plank out of their eye, so yes, I will listen to you. You have a voice here. You're supposed to build that credibility in community. This is why, can we just keep it real? This is why you would listen to some of your friends about an issue and not listen to some other friends about an issue. Why? Because they got a huge forest in their eye. And it's not that your friends that have removed the plank are perfect. They're not. None of us are perfect. It's not perfection. It's credibility. It's credibility. To go, oh, this person can help shape me. Now I want to give us very practical advice at the very end here, and I'm done. I could talk about this topic forever, to be honest. But here's what I want to do. I want to position you for a fruitful life when it comes to this. And here's the first place that we can position ourselves, is to be receivers even of judgment. So here's what I mean. I have made up my mind, I want to grow, and God can, whatever means necessary, Lord, grow me. I want to grow. I want to grow. So I have sat in chairs before, and people that are sitting in this seat have come and spoken things over my life. I've had people set up meetings and say some of the wildest stuff, and they're sitting in this seat, and they're doing this, and they're doing this. And you know what I always tell? I don't even really try to defend myself. Sometimes maybe I'll give some context, but I really don't try to defend myself. What I try to say always at the end is, and again, I know they didn't come with the right heart. I know that they didn't, they're not coming because they love me. They have a log in their eye, and this is what I always say. You know what? I will take that under prayerful consideration. Because what I'm trying to mine out is the 3% of truth that maybe is in what they said. 97% of it might be just rubbish, and you ought not listen to it because the enemy will use people to make you feel insecure and make you question your relationship with God. So I'm not saying do that. I'm not saying listen to everything they're saying. And so when those people leave my office, literally I've done this before. Lord, search me and know me that I might not sin against you. And if there is 5% of truth, help me find it. If there's a kernel of truth in what they're saying, Lord, I want to grow from everybody, and their motives notwithstanding, it doesn't really matter. I want to grow. This is why, by the way, don't let somebody's foolish words cause you to have another church hurt. It's only a church hurt if you let it be a church hurt. It's only a church hurt if you let it be. I can't tell you how many conversations that I could have put in the category of church hurt, but I didn't. I said, Lord, search me and know me. You're my Lord, not them. And there's been times where people have left and I think there was 0%. I think that was probably like a demonic attack, straight up. And then there are many times when it's like, there's 7% in there that I'm gonna take and I'm gonna use and I'm gonna grow. Doesn't matter their motives. Secondarily in this, when you find yourself having to carry the burden, not a position you're seeking, but when you find yourself having to carry a burden where you have to correct a friend, treat it like a burden. Do it with fear and trembling. Do it with a measure of humility. Do it in that way, and I promise you, people are discerning, and they can tell when someone's helping them, and they can tell when somebody is not. And if we can do that, if we can learn from anybody, and we can stay in this seat, come on, then we will exercise the burden of judgment when it's appropriate, but we won't be trying to attain the seat of judgment because it is not ours to sit in. Come on, let's stand to our feet, Grace City Church.